Welcome to Weekly News Highlights, where we wrap up your week with a glimpse back into what went on over the past week. I'm Kim Dami in Seoul. South Korea this week blacklisted 8 North Koreans who are believed to have helped Pyongyang secure funds through illegal arms deals and illicit cyber activities. Wednesday's move was a slap against the North for its intercontinental ballistic missile launch on December 18th. South Korea's improvement in exports will power and navigate the country's growth next year, said President Yoon Suk Yeol during the last cabinet meeting of the year on Tuesday. He promised utmost support for the service sector that could link export growth to a broader domestic economic rebound. South Korea saw yet another round of depressing birth rate figures this week. Fewer than 20,000 babies were born in October. This is a record low number of births for any month of October on record. In response to North Korea's ICBM launch on December 18, South Korea imposed sanctions on 8 North Koreans linked to the North's nuclear and missile development. The latest addition includes the chief of the North's spy agency. Let's first turn to our Choi Min-jung.
South Korea has slapped a fresh round of sanctions on North Korea in response to the regime's most recent launch of an intercontinental ballistic missile on December 18th. Seoul's foreign ministry announced Wednesday that it has targeted 8 individuals. All 8 were reportedly involved in generating profits for the North Korean regime and financing nuclear weapons and missile programs through illegal cyber activities and trading sanctioned materials, including weapons. Among those on the list is Lee Chang-ho, the head of the regime's Reconnaissance General Bureau, also known as the organization behind North Korean hacking groups such as Kim Suk-yeol, Lazarus, and Andariel. Lee is accused of gaining foreign currency and stealing technology through illicit cyber activities. Park Young-han was also sanctioned for trading weapons-related goods on behalf of Korea Mining and Development Trading Corporation, North Korea's primary arms dealer. North Korean diplomat Yoon Chol reportedly traded lithium-6, a UN-prohibited nuclear-related item. The remaining listed individuals are affiliated with Pan Systems Pyongyang, an organization sanctioned by the South Korean government in 2016 and were involved in trading North Korean-made weapons. South Korea's foreign ministry also warned that Pyongyang's provocations would come with a price. It vowed to cooperate more closely with the international community, including the US and Japan, to ensure that the regime realizes that it must stop its provocations and engage in denuclearization talks. With the sanctions now in place, those wishing to engage in financial transactions with these individuals must obtain permission from the governor of the Bank of Korea or the Financial Services Commission. The latest measures are the 14th round of sanctions to be put in place against Pyongyang since the beginning of the Yoon administration. Since October last year, South Korea has targeted 83 individuals and 53 institutions. Choi Min-jung, Arirang News.
And on Tuesday, South Korea published a revised textbook for soldiers, which states that North Korea is who they must fight and defeat. It described the forces in the South who are followers of the North Korean ideology and system as, quote, internal threats. Our Choi Min-jung also covered this story.
South Korea has made clear that the North Korean regime and its military is South Korea's enemy in its renewed educational material for soldiers. The Defense Ministry on Tuesday published a new education document for mental combat power and stated that the military must recognize who the enemies are as North Korea continues to advance its nuclear and missile capabilities.
We have reorganized the content so that our soldiers can clearly recognize the enemy they must fight against amid a severe security situation.
On top of this, the ministry described forces inside South Korea who are followers of the regime's ideology, system, and policies as internal threats. The textbook notes that North Korea has been building underground parties in various parts of South Korean society since the 1960s. According to the materials, the internal forces deny South Korea's liberal democracy, follow North Korea uncritically, and remain silent on the regime's human rights abuses.
Throughout time, we have seen many historical examples and lessons that a country's crisis often starts from within, not from outside. So we should let this be a good lesson.
The textbook is renewed every 5 years, and the latest version is being distributed to soldiers until the end of this month for use starting next year. Compared to the previous Moon administration, which stressed reconciliation and cooperation with North Korea, the renewed edition under the current Yoon administration appears to have taken a much more hardline approach in response to the regime's evolving threats. Choi Min-dang, Arirang News.
South Korea has signed a contract with the U.S. to purchase 20 additional F-35A stealth fighter jets, with plans to deploy them starting in 2027. The Defense Acquisition Program Administration announced on Wednesday that they had concluded the letter of acceptance for the additional procurement of the F-35A. These F-35A stealth fighter jets can covertly penetrate deep into enemy territory for precision strikes. Currently, South Korea operates 39 of them, and this latest purchase will bring the total to 59. Seoul believes the latest additions will feature significantly improved capabilities in terms of threat response, security functions, and weapons operation, helping strengthen its deterrence against North Korean threats. Wrapping up President Yoon Suk Yeol's diplomacy in the global arena this year, we're joined by our presidential correspondent Oh Soo-young to highlight major achievements made by the South Korean leader. Welcome, Soo-young.
Hi, Dami.
So, Soo-young, it's not an exaggeration to say this year was all about diplomacy for President Yoon Suk Yeol, and I understand you have some keywords for us to remember the biggest moments of the year, right? What's the first one?
Right, so I would say the first keyword to share is alliance. And well, South Korea's military-focused alliance with the US, based on the Mutual Defense Treaty signed 70 years ago, became a global comprehensive strategic alliance, really broadening their scope of cooperation to areas like tech, climate, energy, and more. Now, this came as Presidents Yoon and Joe Biden announced the Washington Declaration in April after their summit in DC, and this was amid North Korea's growing nuclear threat. And the two allies set out new measures to boost confidence in the US extended deterrence policy or support to its allies under nuclear or conventional attack. Now, the declaration included the creation of the Nuclear Consultative Group, under which the two sides will discuss and develop joint nuclear response guidelines to a potential North Korean nuclear strike. Now, the declaration was also a major step towards the Camp David trilateral agreements with Japan in mid-August.
That's right. Nowadays, we hear increasingly about that trilateral cooperation. Let's talk more about that.
Right. For South Korea to solidify or take its relations with the US to the next level, especially in terms of security, it really required improving relations with Japan as well, another key US ally in East Asia. The two neighbours' relations, of course, have been fraught with disputes given Japan's wartime atrocities during its imperial rule of Korea. Flying to Tokyo for a summit in March, Yoon went all out to salvage their bilateral ties, which spiralled into a trade war in 2019. Prime Minister Fumio Kishida, he responded in kind and also invited Yoon to the G7 Hiroshima summit. The two leaders then joined Biden at Camp David, and they inked documents on their shared vision and course of action for Indo-Pacific peace and prosperity, as well as joint measures to address North Korea's provocations, such as missile information sharing. Third, they made an agreement to consult each other on any perceived security threat in the Indo-Pacific, and all of this really was to institutionalize trilateral cooperation across the Indo-Pacific region. But some observers say that this actually loosely resembles an alliance system and wonder whether the three countries could actually form an Asian version of the North Atlantic Treaty Organization.
Soo-young, but the question is, will it actually last?
Right, that's a very good question, Tammy. That's the very question that many observers are asking, especially with the upcoming presidential elections in the US in November. The possible return of Donald Trump as US president, that may threaten the continuity of America's alliance-oriented foreign policy, including the trilateral approach to handling North Korea and cooperation on security, supply chains, and technology.
This integrated deterrence strategy, the national security strategy of the Biden administration, it is difficult to undo it, probably because it's more structural and you invest a lot of money on it, and all the technology and the tactical, doctrines are developed based on this general idea. So it would be very difficult to reverse it. but I worry that he might reduce the alliance element in the strategy and strengthen the nuclear part more.
Perhaps that's why we saw Yoon instate Cho Tae-yong, his former national security advisor, known for his deep knowledge and familiarity with US affairs, named as the new national intelligence chief to facilitate the continuity of trust and cooperation between all three sides.
Right, we'll have to wait and see. Now, in the meantime, President Yoon Suk Yeol also held scores of summits with world leaders around the world this year, really expanding South Korea's diplomatic horizon, right?
That's exactly right. So over the decades, South Korea traditionally focused on its relations with the United States, China, then Japan and Russia as key countries surrounding the Korean Peninsula on core security issues, while pursuing more non-political trade deals with other countries. However, given the continued geopolitical risks, the rise of nationalism, protectionism, and the rapid pace of technological development, the post-war world era of globalization, free trade, and multilateral institutions, that's all been waning. So President Yoon has been pushing for a value-based multilateral cooperation for what he calls a rules-based world order to stabilize trade and regional security on top of tackling climate change, digital and global development challenges. He was pledging South Korea's so-called contributive diplomacy to become a global pivotal state. In this regard, he went on over a dozen diplomatic trips this year, even visiting Kyiv to show Korea's value-based solidarity for peace and reconstruction in Ukraine. He's also led global discussions on establishing universal digital norms at places like the G20 and the UN General Assembly. But particularly with a focus on economic security, Yoon has been aiming to procure critical supply chains, energy sources and partnerships on developing new advanced technologies for South Korea's export-dependent economy.
Environment changes in the global economy have actually shifted our focus toward securing global change, economic partners, with precise emphasis on particular resources, particular technologies, particular materials, or particular economic strategies. So, here are the couple of major reasons for this change, as I already said, COVID-19 and the economic tension between the United States and China. So, that's why lots of countries have moved toward a very specialized individual partnership, strategic partnership, rather than the general FTA that emphasize on lowering tariffs to encourage free trade.
Major deals include the Downing Street Accord with the UK on deepening security and economic ties, including cooperation on quantum technology that could potentially neutralize North Korean missiles. A semiconductor alliance was forged with the Netherlands to develop cutting-edge R&D in the technology, which is South Korea's #1 export item. Now, Yoon also strengthened ties with Southeast Asian countries, sealing deals on mineral cooperation with Vietnam and Indonesia, and quite notably, collaboration on maritime security issues. State visits to the UAE, Saudi Arabia and Qatar, followed by a bilateral FTA with Abu Dhabi, also marked a new timely chapter for South Korea's Middle East diplomacy, as the post-war era brings both crises and opportunities to Arab states as crude suppliers and South Korea as a major importer. Now, next year, Tammy, I'm expecting that economic security will continue to be a major keyword as South Korea looks to expand its export markets and new industries such as, bio, also defense and health, other such sectors that South Korea is really trying to get its claws into.
Right, a lot to look forward to. Exactly. Thank you so much for the wrap up today, Seong.
My pleasure as always, Tammy.
This year, 2023, is ending with two major conflicts ongoing: the Israel-Hamas war and the Ukraine crisis. Not only have they affected tens of thousands of innocent civilians, but the wars have also put a spotlight on risks to the Korean Peninsula. Paeun-ji reports.
On October 7th, the Hamas militant group launched an unprecedented surprise attack in Israel, which stunned the country and killed hundreds of people. This is a war that's happening thousands of miles away, but an expert says it could still pose a risk to South Korea, as much of Washington's focus is centered on the Middle East, rather than North Korean threats.
Already, the North Korean issue for the Biden administration and United States as a whole is not top priority at all. But because of this Israel-Hamas war, the North Korean issue is getting lower in the list of the foreign policy. So it makes some kind of negative effect to the Korean Peninsula.
He added that North Korea is also using this chance to be more critical of the U.S. for supporting Israel. In fact, it appears that the North is supporting Hamas. The Israeli military said about 10% of the weapons used by Hamas during its attack on Israel on October 7th were manufactured in North Korea. At the same time, the North has also been able to make strategic moves and strengthen military cooperation with Russia this year through the war in Ukraine. In September, the North's leader Kim Jong-un even held a summit with Russia's Vladimir Putin, highlighting their strong cooperation. This sparked concerns of further arms deals between them, as it's widely believed that North Korea has been able to gain what they want by providing munitions to Russia.
Russia and North Korea have been building close ties, especially through their rare summit this year. Russia was supported with weapons and North Korea has been able to gain military technology. This transaction is how the Ukraine war has greatly impacted the situation on the Korean Peninsula.
These security risks are especially concerning as they come at a time when the North has conducted 5 ICBM launches this year, the highest number in a single year. 배은지, Arirang News.
Again, the new year will be all about shoring up the country's economy through exports. Providing his comprehensive review of 2023 and strategic outlook for 2024, President Yoon Suk Yeol said his administration will give its full support to the service sector, which will link export growth to a broader domestic economic rebound. Shin Se-byuk has the details.
President Yoon Suk Yeol said the economy took a turn upward in 2023, and that improvement in exports will drive the country's growth next year. This, as President Yoon reflected on the year 2023 and discussed strategies for moving forward into 2024 during a cabinet meeting at the Sejong government complex on Tuesday.
정부는 수출 중심의 회복세가 민생과 직결되는 내수 회복으로 이어질 수 있도록 서비스 산업을 집중적으로 지원할 것입니다.
This initiative particularly focuses on the content industry, a field that is rapidly gaining traction among future generations. President Yoon also highlighted the strategic development of high-value sectors like finance and biohealth. In addition, he vowed to focus his efforts on invigorating local economies with a special emphasis on enhancing the tourism and food industries. Yoon's emphasis on nurturing domestic economies through export-led strategies came as South Korea is projected to post some $30 billion for this year's current account surplus. He thanked the people for making it possible.
파탄난 재정과 무너진 시장 경제를 복원하기 위해 노력해온 정부를 믿어주시고 협력해 주신 국민과 기업인들 덕분이라고 할 수 있습니다.
During the meeting, President Yoon also addressed his dedication to implementing 3 key reforms in the areas of national pension, labor, and education. He said these tasks must be pursued to the end to elevate the nation's growth potential. He also highlighted further reforms in the medical sector, including plans to raise the enrollment quota of medical schools to ease deepening regional disparities in medical services. President Yoon also pledged a swift development of strategies through intensive discussions, given its urgency in safeguarding public health. Regarding the government's fiscal plan for next year, recently passed in Parliament, he said it reflects the government's sound fiscal policy principle and called on the cabinet for a swift execution of the budget. Yoon also vowed to do his utmost to enhance the people's quality of life and reaffirmed his commitment to dismantling barriers between government bodies to enable stronger collaboration across the board. Shin Se-byuk, Arirang News.
Inflation expectations for December here in South Korea dropped compared to the previous month due to a downward trend in consumer prices. Now, that 3.2% figure is the lowest in over a year and a half. Lee In-jin has more.
The Bank of Korea released results of its consumer sentiment survey on Wednesday, which shows consumer inflation expectations have dropped this month compared to the month before amid a downward trend in consumer prices. In December, expected inflation for the year ahead was 3.2%. That's down 0.2 percentage points from the previous month, marking the lowest figure in 20 months since April last year. The central bank poll also showed the Composite Consumer Sentiment Index, or CCSI, reversed a 4-month downward streak that began in August. For December, the figure stood at 99.5, up 2.3 points from the previous month, still below the 100-point threshold, indicating that pessimists outnumber optimists. BOK officials say the improvement is due to a slowdown in rising interest rates amid hints that the cycle of U.S. Federal Reserve rate hikes has come to an end. The CCSI is used to gauge overall consumer sentiment, including for current living standards, prospective household income, and prospective spending, all of which are standardized. The central bank had expected inflation to reach a target rate of 2% by the end of this year, but now predicts inflationary pressure to continue into next year, with inflation expected to stay over 3% around the end of 2023. 이은진, Arirang News.
It's becoming harder to hear the laughs and cries of babies here in South Korea. Just around 19,000 babies were born in October. Now, that's an 8% drop compared to the same month a year ago. These depressing figures come as more and more people decide not to have babies due to economic and social hurdles. To ease such burdens, the government is considering an option where people on parental leave can receive a payment of over $1,500 a month. That's an increase on the current $1,100. Still, what stops many parents from taking parental leave are workplace conditions, especially small and medium-sized businesses. Data collected by Statistics Korea last year showed 60% of moms on parental leave and over 70% of dads on parental leave work for firms with more than 300 workers. In the meantime, though, more dads are taking advantage of parental leave, deciding to stay with their kids at home. 3 out of 10 people on parental leave were fathers last year. That's a record high number. And to encourage both parents to take leave during the same period or at separate periods, starting next year, the government will allow them to receive almost $3,500 per person for 6 months. Ahead of the general election taking place next April, South Korea's National Election Commission has introduced changes for improved transparency and confidence in vote counting. There'll now be ballot counting by hand. Our Lee Si-hoo explains more.
There will be manual ballot counting in next year's general election. This is part of the new set of plans announced by the National Election Commission on Wednesday to improve transparency and confidence in the election process. Currently, the ballot counting clerks use electronic ballot counting machines and check with their naked eye whether the machines are correctly sorting the ballots. The process has led to suspicions of fraudulent ballot counts using machines and criticism that clerks are unable to properly check the machine's rapid counting. With the announced change, however, clerks will count the ballots with their hands in addition to the electronic counting. Although this will require more clerks and take more time, the NEC said it will help prevent suspicions of fraudulent vote counting that have been repeatedly raised in the past and eventually found to be untrue. Moreover, CCTV will record in real time the storage rooms of ballot boxes and share the footage on large screen monitors at regional NEC offices. Barcodes will replace QR codes on early ballots. In addition, as recommended by the National Intelligence Service, the NEC will prevent wireless hacking attempts on ballot counting machines by employing control programs using USBs only. Lee Si-hoo, Arirang News.
Starting next year, foreign national business leaders can be designated the so-called same person in conglomerates here in South Korea. That means they can be named chiefs of companies following a rule change. Park Gun-woo has this report.
Starting from the first day of next year, Korea's Fair Trade Commission has announced that foreign nationals leading Korean conglomerates may be subject to regulation. These individuals, if designated as the same person, a term used for the chief or de facto leader of these conglomerates, will be held accountable under FTC rules. The same person is typically the chief executive of a conglomerate with total assets exceeding 5 trillion Korean won as determined by the FTC. The purpose of this designation is to closely monitor corporate behavior and enforce rules against anti-competitive practices. Furthermore, the FTC plans to implement stricter regulations for companies under the same chief, particularly in their business and financial dealings. The latest amendment introduces 4 exceptional criteria that allow the FTC to designate a corporate entity as the same person responsible for a business group, even if a different individual is officially in charge. These criteria include the actual controller of the business group does not have an investment in its affiliated company, and the official chief's relatives neither invest in nor hold executive positions in an affiliated company. If any of the 4 conditions is not fulfilled, the FTC has the authority to designate an individual, including foreign nationals, as the same person responsible for the company. This started getting controversial after Coupang, the largest e-commerce platform in Korea, was designated as a conglomerate by the FTC in 2021, and the Coupang corporate body was designated as same person instead of the Korean-American head, Kim Bum-seok. As he has U.S. citizenship, there were concerns that it is unfair under Korean law to other Korean persons because there were no precise regulations for those foreign nationals. But if the amendment gets implemented, it is expected that Kim will not be designated as the same person as he fulfills all of the 4 conditions. Park Gon-woo, Arirang News.
That is all we have for this week. We thank you for watching Weekly News Highlights and Happy New Year.